This is Senate Transportation. It's February 19th. We are here with the Policy Planning Intermodal Division and Jana Morse, the Director of Finance and Administration Division. You're on.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jana Morse. I'm the Division Director for Finance and Administration. And I'll be talking with you today about our Finance and Administration budget, as well as our Transportation Buildings Appropriation budget, which both fall under the section of F&A. So the white book section is section 4, it's the tab here, and the black book section is pages 1 through 22 that we'll be talking about today. The Finance and Administration Division is audit, budget, and financial operations, contracts and grants administration, civil rights, labor compliance, continuous improvement, innovation, learning and development, performance management, emergency management, occupational health and safety, records management, Vermont local roads, and we liaise with DHR, digital services, and legal. And then we also have our facilities bureau and finance under our team as well. So this budget continues salaries for 9 limited service positions, which were authorized by Joint Fiscal Office in July 2022, related to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We were originally approved for 11 positions under Finance and Administration, but due to operational needs, we were able to return 2 of them in this fiscal year, 26 fiscal year. The budget also includes, the Attorney General's Office salaries and benefits for 6 staff attorneys who support the entire agency. Our vacancy rate is 5.8%. We have 11 positions currently vacant, most of which are under recruitment. So our total budget is $26.5 million estimated, with just a small fraction of that being federal funds, and a larger portion being our transportation funds. The increase of $1.9 million or 8% is attributable to the salaries and benefits that are included in the collective bargaining agreement for the employees within this division. So to further break that down in a little different view, you see the transportation fund and the federal fund on the pie chart on the left, and then the spending profile on the right. We are 130 permanent positions, 9 limited service positions. 90% or more of our budget is operational. That includes our personal services and service level agreements with digital services, human resources, and others. The MOU with the Attorney General Office, as well as mandatory certification trainings for safety, hearing protection, respirator, CDL, commercial driver's license, etc. The flexible area is our fleet rentals, training, printing, and postal services. So, Sherry, you had inquired about including in our presentation impacts of the cut list. And for finance and administration, it's approximately $1 million that we had proposed, and we would use position management strategies to effectuate a reduction in salaries and benefits in our budget.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What does that mean? What's a position management strategy? Is that like using vacancy savings?
So it could be using vacancy savings. We would essentially not fill positions as they become vacant. As well through 26. We have some known retirements coming in federal and state fiscal 26. We might choose to repurpose positions and figure out how to navigate that at a division level, and also maybe at an agency-wide level a little bit better as well. Any other questions?
So I will have a question on how that is.
Go ahead.
So maybe when you decide to not fill positions, existing positions, do you document what could be lost, or the challenges that you'll have? Because obviously there would be, I'm sure there's economies of scale or whatever, use technology, but still there have to be negative impacts. So do you document those?
Thank you for asking that question. So anytime we have a vacancy, we always look at what does the position do now, and how do we need to use this role in the future? So, for example, when I was in a former role as I worked in performance and strategic management before I came into this role, we had a vacancy in a continuous improvement position, but what we really needed was a data analyst. So we decided to change that position to a data analyst, and we need a data analyst supervisor. So looking at the needs of the agency and looking at what we need within our unit, within the bureau, how we support the agency as a whole. And we always look at positions to see if it's something that we need to fill in a like-to-like position. If we don't need to fill it at all, maybe we take some time. Maybe we take 6 to 9 months to evaluate whether we do need to fill that position and what the risks are of distributing that work in other ways. Because it's always a growth opportunity to give somebody something new to do. So if we have up and comers in other positions, maybe it's an opportunity to promote them by giving them additional work. And then we have to look at the trickle down effect of that. How does that added work affect that position? And does work need to be distributed and so on? So sometimes it takes some time to analyze what the risks might be. And we ultimately might determine we do need to fill that position. And then we look as an agency at all of our vacancies and see how we can best repurpose them across the organization.
Okay. So that's just obviously something really important, and we'll talk about it later. I would like.
Go ahead.
So you showed some of like the budget sheet when you flashed it, but I don't see that on your presentation.
I didn't put the white book or the black book pages.
It's all just in the.
It's all in the book. Yeah.
Okay.
Was there something in particular you were hoping to dive
Well,
into?
no, like the personnel increase of 8%. I just wanted to see how that was broken down by health insurance and wages and everything.
I can provide that too.
Well, it's all in the
In more
book.
detail. Yeah.
So the vacancy savings was 5.8%. How much is that?
So we currently have 5.8% of our positions are vacant. That equates to 11 positions, estimating about $100,000 per position. It's about $1.1 million. Some of those positions are currently.
Of that 1 million that you cut. Is that, that's not on top of the 5.8, or is it, or does the 5.8 built into, would that take care of this?
The $1 million is not included in the 5. So currently we have 5.8% of our positions vacant. Some of those are already under recruitment. They are positions we absolutely need to fill.
But built into your underlying budget, going forward to next year, is it built on a 5.8% vacancy rate? You currently have
Oh, no,
that. What vacancy rate is built into that? And is that 1 million expected to be built? Is your vacancy savings going to take care of the piece of that? Or will you have to cut deeper?
so our agency estimates a 5% vacancy rate that is not applied specifically to a division, but we look overall at the organization and determine how each division will work on 5%. So the specific application of a vacancy rate to finance and administration, we typically hold about a 2% vacancy rate. That's our contribution to the agency. The assumption of a $1 million in cut would be additional to this budget were we not to receive the $20.25 million.
So your budget is based on, am I hearing you right, a 5% vacancy rate? And that, if a 5.8% is like 1.1 million, I'm probably looking at 900,000. 5% vacancy rate is in your division. But on top of that, if you were going to take care of all of this in vacancy savings, you would probably have to have something north of a 10% vacancy savings rate to be able to accommodate this.
That's correct, Senator.
So what this really means is you're going to have to go into finance and administration and find positions to eliminate, because most of your work in this area, it is people related.
It is.
You know, other areas where you're buying salt or you're paving a road or something, it's cutting a contract, but this is out now. What you're telling us is you're going to have to cut positions in finance and administration.
It would not be our choice to cut positions. We would seek to do this through vacancy savings and look at other reductions in the operation. So we might be turning in fleet vehicles. We might be doing less training, and we would have to assess all of those against the agency's operational needs.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I have the white book and I have the black book in front of me. So I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right pages because you're the first one who's come in to us. So I just see one page in the white.
In finance and administration, it's just the appropriations page, summary by our major objects, which is personal services and operating and grants. And then the transportation fund and the federal revenue fund are the source of the monies that cover our proposed budget, governor recommended budget.
And it's great just on the white, but it's how you have the next 3 years projected.
Yes.
That's helpful. Okay.
And then the details of each of those categories is in the black book in pages 1 through 22.
Okay, so I'm saying I don't see specific positions. It just has them clumped together, right?
So for the specific positions start on, I believe on page 15
In the
black book.
black book.
Yes.
Where would you find what do we call the black book again? Like, they have different, to find it. Well, on the website, all the sheets are on the white book in there, or the black book.
But it's
Those also on the website?
In the house. My apologies.
No, but on that, but
We can get you
we're on
copies.
the website, on your website, AOT's website.
I don't think we posted the black book on the website.
I think just the capital.
Okay.
so there isn't a page 50. It just goes to a 12.
So there's 13. And then the position started.
Okay. So it says 11 of 12, but then there's this extra thing, I guess. Okay, so this is, so is this just your division then?
Yes.
Finance and
Every-
administration?
The black book has each of these, each section. So I'm picking up the white book. Each section of the black book has the front has the table of contents. Each
Yeah.
section that you'll be looking at has the specific page numbers to the right, and with the bottom end of each of those sections, you should find the position list.
Okay, okay, so then do you say in this folks or positions that you already gotten rid of, or whatever the right word is?
So these are positions that are included in our governor's recommended budget, including the ones that are currently vacant that we have under recruitment and ones that are vacant that we have not recruited for yet.
Okay, so the ones that have been not included are not here.
The only difference between the black book from last year and the black book from this year is the reduction of those 2 limited service positions that we did not choose to carry forward.
Okay,
What you're really telling us is you've included all the positions from last year in this.
Yes.
And your vacancy savings rate is at 5%. That has been given to you in the overall budget. The likelihood is, after you go through cutting training, maybe vehicles, and is some of these positions will not be filled.
That would be a correct assumption.
So what we're really looking at and what we're struggling to try to understand here is how many positions and in what areas would be the first places that that the agency would have to go to create a reduction on that list. Where are the focus points that we will be spending that with, if everything doesn't go perfectly and you are forced to reduce the work of finance and administration, where's the first place you would look?
The first place I would look would be at any of our vacant positions, and then I would start with our vacant limited service positions. Beyond that,
That I totally get what you would have to do functionally. What I'm asking is in the work that you do, in the focus of areas that you do, will you let the decisions around this be driven by where the vacancies are? Or do you have a plan to say there are policy areas and there are different issues that we deal with that we would cut back on those first? So this was an exercise in a reduction that was not only driven by who might be ready to retire, but what work we need done.
We would absolutely look at the critical services that the division offers to the agency and look at some of the non-essential areas first, starting with operations.
And how would we get a feel for what might be it? Granted, you're going to go through and cut cards, you're going to go through and say we might do less training, all of those things. But how would we get a feel for what areas you might say these areas are the areas where we would pull back?
It's a really tough question. And, most of the services that finance and administration offers are in support of drawing down our federal dollars. So at this point, I think we would do a much deeper analysis of the areas that we would have to look into and where we cannot cut positions because they're connected to the work that we do to draw down our federal dollars, and areas where the positions aren't as connected to the federal dollars. We would have to assess there first to see where positions are aligned with the work and the priorities of the agency, and where we might have flexibility to utilize vacancy savings across the organization to ensure that our Vermonters stay employed.
It's not our job to manage the agency, and it's your job to do. It is our job to understand what policy pullbacks we might create.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that high level, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with, we need to make sure that we don't lose federal opportunities and grants and all of those things. What we need to be comfortable with is, if we're going to pass a budget where there are significant reductions in what you're doing, where are the and repeating myself, but where are the focus points that we're not, from a policy level, that we're not going to be able to do as much work? And then I don't want to be sitting here next year and say, somebody, why didn't we do this?
It's a really tough conversation to have when we're thinking about our friends and our neighbors that are in these positions, that work for the Agency of Transportation, that work for other agencies or through state government. And how do you describe to somebody that the work that they're doing isn't valuable? And we're not in a place to do that. So, we would look to our vacancies across the agency as a whole to absorb this $1 million, that were we not to receive the as the governors recommend, the $20.25 million JTRAC reversion, then we would have to look deeply within our organization and make some very, very deep decisions on, do these positions get cut from other areas in the organization? Are we looking at Michelle's budget to cut vacancies further? Are we looking at Ernie's budget to cut vacancies further? And how does that affect our various plans that we have, our snow and ice control plan, our ability to deliver services, to our maintaining roads? It's just not feasible to look at cutting positions. We've given back positions to the pool every single time we're asked. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I know that we have turned back at 1.8 positions with one request, a couple of positions at other requests, and finance administration and DMV and others have turned back in positions from the limited service pool this year, knowing that we were doing everything that we could to reduce the position count within our organization, obtain some savings, and really hone in on our core operations. It would be incredibly detrimental to everything that we do to ask us to cut another $1 million worth of positions from finance administration. We would not be able to perform the services that are asked of us.
I'm not clear what $1 million.
So we had proposed on the memo that I submitted, I think it was maybe a week or two ago now, on what would happen if we didn't get the $20.25 million. $1 million of that would come from finance and administration in the form of cuts through position management. We would be looking at vacancies first. We have to.
What if you didn't get the 17 million of TMB fees?
I haven't done that analysis yet.
I don't think,
Drumbeat.
when you ask the secretary or you ask the gubernatorial appointments, all of this, I don't think she's an appointed position.
Sure.
So I'm not really clear that
Good one.
it's hers to answer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, can
I-
oh, go ahead.
I would just say to you what you just said, and I totally appreciate the 20 million. And I totally appreciate this. But when I look at next year and I see from the numbers laid out that we could have as much as a $30 million hole in state revenues, that would create way bigger holes than year one did. And I think it's important for us to understand that, because unless we do something about revenue for the agency in a fairly short period of time, next year at this time when we're sitting here, it's going to be a bigger hole than that $1 billion. And I personally think that's frightening. But thank you for to want to continue to go through your sheets.
Sure. So I must have gone back. And if there's no other question from finance and administration, I'll just skip forward a few slides to the transportation buildings budget. Okay. So transportation buildings, I did bring Mr. McAvoy with me. He's our facilities manager. So if you have specific questions beyond the numbers on things that we have in our facilities, that type of thing, I will swap seats with him and offer that he can answer questions for you. Okay, so transportation buildings. This is section 13 of your white book. And for those who have your black book out, I apologize. Mine doesn't seem to have it on here. Around page 50 of the black book. So transportation buildings, we are offering a budget this year of over to the other side, apologies. $2.5 million. Our budget request is intended to be to build the new Springfield 6-bay garage. This is on the existing property. I have a map on one of the next slides and I'll be able to show that shortly. We reduced our statewide maintenance to nothing this year. We've absorbed most of the statewide maintenance needs within each individual budget. So, for example, rail, aviation, and district maintenance all have operational budgets, and they typically contribute monies through their operational budgets towards the statewide maintenance needs for their particular facilities. And so we've elected to pursue, based on the priorities of each of those divisions, the budget through their own divisions this year.
Can I just ask, the budget for transportation buildings in this current budget year, is that, what was that?
2.5 million.
So, so all of the 2.5s, it's just,
The Springfield garage.
okay,
Yes.
well, that's 26.
I'm sorry, this year's 25.
In 25, so of
In
that,
20
that's
In
the
25,
26 budget overview.
But there's specified 25 of mine says 2.825.
Oh, yes, okay.
for the current fiscal year.
Yes, okay,
So the budget request, the governor's recommend budget request for fiscal 26 is $2.5 million.
okay. I'm looking in the white book, you've only got 26. Without the 20.
without the 25 in
Yeah.
there, okay. So in 25, the annotation on the screen also indicates that we received the capital bill appropriation of $3.5 million, but that's not transportation fund. So it's not included in our 25-26 budget comparison
It was for one of the garages. What was it?
for District 8,
What was that amount?
the 3.5 million. That was a one-time capital bill appropriation.
I don't remember.
So does that mean the 3.5 and the 2.8 all went to District 8
The 3.5 and the 2 million
in the tubing?
on the first line under
Yeah,
state fiscal 25. And then the statewide maintenance, the 825,000 is typically for heating systems, repairs, generators, that type of thing. We did a couple major generator replacements this past year, so we didn't need to include anything for generators in the 26 budget. That couldn't be accommodated, like if district maintenance had a repair they needed, they would typically absorb that within their budget. So the next slide shows the proposed 6-bay maintenance garage. There's a blue box kind of in the middle of the screen. I don't know if my cursor is going to show up or not for you. Okay, great. So this is the proposed location. There's an existing garage here, but due to the space needs, and I'll let Brad speak a little bit more to the operational needs if you'd like to hear about them. There's essentially too many people working out of too small of a space.
Yeah.
And that is the purpose for needing to invest in this facility that's on the existing property. The red line that outlines through here is our existing property line. And then there's these are other state office building over here, correct?
No, isn't that the gas station?
That's the
Yeah.
gas station. I didn't bring my glasses.
I've been to that.
If you want, what number are you?
About 1.5.
It would work.
I'm just starting to need to get them. So
So yeah, that's where you get up the interchange and then you got the hotel over there and then you got the 4-way. You're not gonna,
Five, there we go.
are you doing any,
Go ahead.
obviously this is my district.
You know,
So just so I understand, you're not gonna do any intersection work there? Cause that entrance is awful getting into there. And you see, so like right exactly where your cursor is, that is terrible as a driver going to get gas. And then also the amount of vehicles coming in and out of that location for the garage. Are you doing any work to improve that weird homogeneous meeting point of all vehicles, including large commercial trucks? Because if you're expanding this, I expect there will be increased traffic as well, or
So we don't have any plans for the intersection as part of the specific facility project, but I could certainly inquire if there's any planned work at this location in the next couple of years.
it'd be lovely to see at least improved signage, because what oftentimes happen is people fly off the highway, they get into the gas station, they don't look, and then there's some kind of vehicle coming out of the AOT location, and then you get this strange, like, people stopping on the main thoroughfare right there, and then congestion. And so it's not well designed. I don't think you own the area that has the congestion that is right in front of the gas station, but I would say it's probably prone to some sort of vehicle on vehicle situation if there hasn't already been one.
We'll certainly raise those
Maybe it's
concerns.
fine.
go ahead.
So this is a process question. Do you go through Act 250 when you have something that would trigger Act 250 in other cases? I'm just thinking, because that's where that review would typically come by V-Trans.
So we have gone through Act 250 in the past for some projects.
Okay.
This particular one will not trigger it.
So it didn't meet the threshold.
So this particular project is adding a structure on an existing property. The current complex is shared with the maintenance division bridge crew as well as the garage staff. The bridge crew is going to move into the existing garage structure, which I believe is right here. They're currently working out of a temporary job trailer, which will be removed and potentially repurposed, but it might be at end of useful life. I'm not 100% sure on that one. And then the new garage is going to better serve the agency's needs to have the 4 trucks operating out of there, as opposed to where they are now. And I believe they're at 2 trucks now out of that location. Plus they'll have their loader and their excavator, which they need to perform their operations. And it will also be a little bit wider bays so that the trucks can actually fit in there and get out and planning for the future, we'll be able to accommodate some of the wider swaths as well.
Do you have like is there a salt pit over there or a sand pit as well? Do you have?
For the record, Brad McAvoy, Custodian Manor. There is a salt shed in the back and there is a little bit of sand storage I believe in the back.
That might be this building right here.
Yeah, that
Okay.
is listed.
Looks like it's covered though, somewhere.
Yeah. I think all the states are.
No, we apparently have one someplace.
Oh.
Somebody said, so
And not in
So-
Springfield.
I,
Are you talking sand or salt?
salt.
Not that I'm aware of, but Ernie, Pat, may be able to.
Yesterday, when we took up the chloride reduction bill that's in natural resources, someone said there was either a salt and sand or someplace there was only one left within the state system that, so,
I believe at this point we're all covered other than a few handful of sand storage, which I know probably going forward, we're gonna have to cover to some extent, so.
so how many sand aren't covered?
If I may, Brad,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would defer to district maintenance and fleet because that would really be their operations and we might visit their location, but we're not up to speed on the
Can
day-to-day.
you pass that along that we have asked the question where there might be anything uncovered that might fall under the purview of that bill?
I can pass.
Yeah, if you could find that out for us, because we might get a question.
And then just to follow up a little bit on a different but related topic, the town of Springfield is looking at building new facilities for this on some of the DOC property. So I think that's just off of this view that you have. And I think it would be a good idea. Well, first of all, I'm sure you do coordinate with towns sometimes. I mean, it might make sense to co-locate facilities,
Well,
or maybe not.
we do work with towns and municipalities to some extent, mainly just providing sample salt shed plans or answering questions on sizing and things like that, but we don't work too closely with them on new construction other than that.
Okay,
We typically don't locate.
okay. So that's another conversation. Okay, well, do you know if the Springfield site is near this?
Just past the intersection that Senator White is talking about, 500 yards maybe, there's a right-hand turn that brings you up to the correctional site parcel.
Okay, okay. All right.
Also not a great, area. That whole area.
Right, no, that's on a curve. It's not. It's challenging, okay.
So the last slide I have to share with you is our several year outlook. We revisit this plan every single year. Every year, our facilities team goes out with each of the divisions and to the department and assesses our maintenance facilities, our rail, our aviation, our DMV locations, determines what the state of the condition of the asset is. We have deterioration models that are built into our asset management information system. And then we produce our several year outlook. This might change as, if we were to go out, for example, something were to happen at maybe the Mendon facility that would, or maybe that's a bad example, maybe Lunenburg, the repairs that we put in the short term aren't sufficient, or maybe there was a terrible storm and the facility was damaged beyond repair, then we might move that into an earlier year and push some other projects out, or we might seek multiple projects in one year, but we would have to weigh that and assess it against any of the other operational needs of the organization. So this just kind of gives an outlook of the different types of facilities that we might be looking at in the future. Some of which I believe we've talked about with several of you before. Lunenburg has been out to bid and received no bid several years ago and then came back in. We were thinking about putting it out to bid and then the Springfield need came up. So that's just kind of how dynamic we are with adapting to the needs of within the facilities team of adapting to the needs of maintenance, rail and aviation.
Mr. Chair, just a question. So is the goal to use TIP funds on capital?
So we can use TIB or TF, transportation funds, where we balance the need of the amount that we have available in TIB with other projects that we have competing for that particular fund source. So I really rely on our CFO to advise them whether the TIB funds would be more appropriate here in a given year and what that balance might look like.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions?
No, but I'm really grateful to see Springfield on there. Sad for Lunenburg, but not.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We looking at.
Oh, your hair's so short in that photo.
Yeah.
Looks good both ways.
Yeah.
Keep them guessing.
Did we get that handed out last week?
You did. Do you want me to print it again? I already have one. Good.
Yep. Ready.
Okay,
Just a little behind.
for the record, Michelle Boomhauer, and I am the Policy Planning and Intermodal Development Director for the Agency of Transportation. And intermodal development includes our rail, aviation, and public transit assets and programs. Before I start my presentation, I will respond to the number of covered salt and sand piles. So 100% of our salt piles are undercover at this time. And we have 9 sand piles that are not undercover, one of which has treated sand with salt. And based on our internal conversations, we have determined that we can relocate and or reduce the size of our sand piles to fit undercover at all of our existing facilities. And but we may also want to suggest that the bill require sand piles to be contained, not necessarily covered, to prevent runoff, and to require sand treated with salt to be undercover. So there's kind of the differentiation, because we know that phosphorus attaches to sand, and that's part of our discharge issues with water quality.
So just before we go to Andy, so are you gonna provide us with language?
We're working closely with Senator Watson on the language. So I know we've
If you
had,
could share whatever language
Yeah.
you've got with the Natural Resources Committee, if you could share that with us. Senator Watson and I have been talking back and forth about how we might do this and what makes the most sense.
okay.
That answer.
Okay. The great minds.
We shall do so. Thank you. All right, so back to my budget overview. This page is the one that the secretary would have presented in his overview, and it just gives the summary of the ups and downs of the various programs, along with kind of the larger category of activities that those programs cover. And the public transit slide was also detailed in the secretary's presentation because of it's a bit more complex in terms of funding streams than some of the other sources. But just to highlight some of the areas on the public transit side where we've had increases and reductions. So on operations, carbon reduction funds, which are a special IIJA federal program resource, which is one of the areas that has come into sort of extensive review at the federal level of late, has been used for microtransit pilots, which we've been expanding. As you can see, we have 6 pilots currently in operation in Morrisville, Windsor, Manchester, Middlebury, Newport Derby, and Brattleboro. And so those microtransit pilots are qualified activity under carbon reduction funding. And we are looking at ways to continue to maximize the flexibility that is provided under the carbon reduction program to move those funds from that federal funding category into the Federal Transit Administration category, which is allowable and would basically allow us to continue those services going forward as proposed. The next area that, yes. Oh, sorry.
So, thank you. So I'm just trying to understand. So, we didn't get the carbon reduction funds, or they're just paused, or
Yeah,
not?
let me go to a slide up here that will help better explain where we stand.
Okay, so this is, okay, so this
Yeah.
is one example within that.
Yeah, so under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the president recently issued an executive order on his inauguration day, pausing many programs and looking at modifications for some programs. And those programs that we're impacted by include our National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, and our total appropriation across the 5 years of the transportation bill for NEVI is $21 million. We had very little of that money obligated to date due to the fact that it took a long time for rules and program guidelines to be promulgated. And then it took an additional longer period of time to come up with a contracting mechanism that Federal Highway would agree to, which would involve the construct, maintenance, and operations of, I don't have all the contractual functions in there, but basically allow us to do a public-private partnership with a charging station developer, which would set them out to find a piece of land where they could potentially lease from an existing entity to be the site host. And then the charging company would develop the site. We would pay for that development. We would pay for them to maintain that site for 5 years and operate the site additionally. And then the infrastructure would be turned over to that private entity after the 5-year period of engagement through the grant. And so the only site that is operational at this point is Bradford. We have 2 sites that the contracts just moved forward on, which are funded under the ARPA funding, which we received after the pandemic. And that is state monies that were able to be converted from ARPA to general fund. And so we have 2 sites that are going to be coming online through that. The rest of our NEVI program is now on the carbon reduction program, which brought us here. The total appropriation over the 5 years is $32 million. We've only obligated $3.5 million to date. We were able to transfer under the program guidelines, $8 million to the Surface Transportation Block Grant. And then those monies were, oops. Just a second, I'll get to Jana. Those monies have been used for projects that have similar outcomes as carbon reduction program was seeking. And this was prepared last for the presentation on the 13th. And since the 13th, we now have the ability to transfer these carbon reduction program funds, and we have access to them. Similarly with the Protect funds, where we didn't have access or transferability last week. And if I may, my colleague Jana Morse, who works most directly with our Federal Highway Programs Office, in Montpelier, she may have a few more items to add relative to these two programs, if that would be okay.
It's certainly okay, and I'm trying to understand. I'm not trying to understand with everything going on, how much of this might be at risk.
All of it, not all of it. I shouldn't say all of it. I
No,
would
but
say that
how
every,
do I measure,
Yeah.
we've drawn down some.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out where we are
right.
and
Let's-
what,
yeah.
what they might try to claw back or not claw back. I just, I don't know. I see all of this. I quite frankly am scared.
Right. Gina, I think we'll have some of these answers.
If I may, Senator.
If now is the time, between the two of you, you figure out how you wanna tell the story.
Oh, do you want to join me up here? Sure. Because this is a complicated story and it's
Well,
the,
that's what
at the heart
that-
of.
No, it's all you're doing, so.
Well, and it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very unusual situation we find ourselves. in.
Yeah.
So, for the record,
well,
Jane
here,
Morse.
I just say what I most worry about is us getting contracts out and having signed contracts with contractors
Mhm.
saying that we would do this, and then based upon what we totally believe in what was passed by Congress, and then stuff comes up and isn't there. I feel in the pinch between, I don't want small contractors going out of business because we signed it, but there's only so much we can do.
Mhm.
And so I'm just trying to understand.
So if I may, I'll explain a little bit about what I know right now and what I expect to hear in the future. So for the record, again, Jana Morse, Director of Finance and Administration. We have been monitoring our access to federal funds since the administration transition, the federal administration transition. And initially, we had our Federal Information Management System, or FEMAS, Federal Finance System, FEMAS, was completely shut down. We were unable to do transfers. We were unable to obligate. We were unable to draw down funds. And that very quickly was rectified. It was very quickly opened to programs, the formula fund programs that are core to our operations. So our surface transportation block grant and several others were opened up relatively quickly. The areas that we experienced shut down with kind of no end in sight are the new Green Deal related programs. So the NEVI program in particular, the federal government has since indicated that they're going to be reassessing the NOFO for that program, what the plans might look like. So the plan that we submitted for our NEVI implementation is essentially void. And once the new guidelines come out, if they come out, then we will be eligible to resubmit a plan at that point in time, once we know what the new guidelines are. To me, that means that the NEVI funds are at high risk and we should not plan on having access to them in the near future. So compound all of the challenges with the various funds, we're under a continuing resolution with our federal budget right now. So until March 14, we have a finite amount of funds available to us from our formula program, and we're navigating the various access to the different programs that we had received under the IIJA.
So the NEVI, the 21 million,
The 21 million,
that's at risk.
yes.
Are the carbon reduction programs in the hazard mitigation in each of those categories, are they at risk in the same manner?
No.
Okay.
So I would say individually, based on what information we have today and the analysis that we have done on the funding, the intent behind it, all of the language around how it's appropriated and how that relates to the new administration's priorities, the PROTECT monies, we do not believe are at risk. They are fully open and available to us as of this week. We can transfer from PROTECT to any other program. We are not choosing to do that because we receive a higher cent for our dollar, keeping the money in PROTECT at 90/10 and applying it through our resilience improvement plan, or our RIP, versus transferring that money to surface transportation block grant money, where it becomes 80-20, and we'd have to come up with another 10% match. So we're leaving that money where it is. We are able to obligate a portion of funds at the end of this construction season, and we have a very big plan for how that will roll out over the next couple of years, which Andrea and others could speak to a little bit more. I'll go back up to the carbon reduction, if that's okay.
So there's lots of questions here.
Yeah.
But Andy's got some, and what I would say is it would be helpful if we could, maybe get a half an hour in here of what really on the ground are the type of things that are at risk and what aren't. So we have a clearer answer for when people talk about this. Okay, but Andy.
Yeah.
So your slide says on the protect, you just talked about access unavailable. Is that different than what you said, or am I misinterpreting?
These slides were prepared from the Secretary's budget, which at the time, these monies were not available, and now they're open. Yeah.
At least for that one.
And for the carbon reduction. So the carbon reduction monies are open. We're able to transfer this morning another $2.3 million to STVG, which just gives us more flexibility with how we utilize the money. And it doesn't mean that we have not done any analysis internally on changing how we would apply those funds. We are simply saying we're making them STVG. We're reducing the risk that they would be carbon reduction monies if those monies were to be targeted. But based on what we're hearing now, the monies are available. And as long as your projects are in alignment with the administration's priorities and focus on, the areas that we're looking at there, then those monies are much less at risk than we had originally anticipated them being, even last week. We've learned a couple other areas that have opened up. We're testing those right now, so I'm not quite prepared to speak to them, but I would welcome the opportunity to come back to the committee and present a more comprehensive risk analysis of our funding sources.
I think that for us to spend a half an hour on that would be good to really understand what type projects these are and where we, and if I hearing in the hall, we have obligated some funds in the NEVI area.
Correct.
Signed some it would be nice for us to be able to articulate what has been, we signed contracts for, where we are with that, and who, if we don't pay them, would be left. I'm not, I'm going to only speak for myself. I loathe the fact that we might have signed a contract and leaving somebody in the, I don't think that's not anything that I would like to see happen. Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for the update. And it's basically good news, or it's less bad news, but versus
Less bad news is a good way to put it.
but compared to last week,
We now have access to more things than we did last. So I would categorize it as less bad.
less bad. So, just a couple of questions. What I heard last week was that Bradford was the only project that was completed and that you thought would be completed, but now there's 2 more sites.
Yeah,
Are you able to say what those sites are, or do you?
if I could remember.
Yes.
Yes.
And maybe one of us will find this quicker than the other.
Or another, my other suggestion was going to be, because Chair, things are changing weekly,
Yeah.
right? It would be very helpful to just have a 1-pager
Yeah.
on,
Well,
what's
when
happening.
they come back, I think
right,
that's what I'm envisioning.
right. And
Them
next
coming
week,
back, I was thinking 3 pages and and
Yeah.
each one of these areas, they could tell us, give a better outline of what is on the type project under the carbon reduction area, what is hazard mitigation, what are those type projects versus the electrical vehicle infrastructure, and how does this So I was thinking 3 pages.
Okay. I'm fine with one, but whatever works for you, but obviously the chair wins, but some of my constituents are really just about general highway funds, and I let them know what I thought I heard from the secretary, which is that general highway funds are relatively safe. As far as we know. So if you could just put that on the list.
Yeah.
Just because that could change, and I just don't want to assume anything.
Yeah.
At this time.
Okay. And the 2 charging stations that are being funded with the ARPA turned into general fund funds are the Randolph station and the Wilmington station.
Okay.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get more, right?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
You know, where the NEVI program goes, and whether we're, you know, historically, under the provisions of the IIJA, we were able to use other categories of funding, including CMAQ and, STBG and, CRP to fund charging stations, but currently those areas are also on hold. So we have no source of funding beyond these 2 stations that are under advancement for charging stations at this time.
Okay, but again, at least there will be 3. And last week there was only 1. So
Yeah, you know, I think if things hadn't
Okay.
been so difficult to advance through over the past 4 years, we might have had 20. You know, so it's a little disappointing for the program.
Yeah.
And us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this update. It's positive that there is supposedly getting better over time. So we have an 80-20 match with the NEVI funds,
Yes.
and we have an 80-20 with carbon reduction, and we have a 90-10 with protect.
Right.
Okay, so do we have, how are you factoring that into the need for state dollars conversation for federal match?
Yep. So on the NEVI program, the contractor brings the 20% match as their contribution in the public-private partnership. And so there's no state match impact there.
Okay.
And under the carbon reduction program, I go back here. Hey, how are you? So, the federal match, the CRP funds that were anticipated to be programmed in 26 were $3 million. And those would have a $750,000 state match. And if we go down, actually it's not, there's no slide on this, but one of the things I was going to talk about in my budget presentation was the fact that we had to identify the $20.25 million in potential cuts if we don't get the JTOC transfer. And so the current cut anticipated for environmental policy and sustainability would be the $3 million federal funding and the $750,000 TF that goes with that. And so that's, you know, I think the carbon reduction program funds, if we can move those to another area, you know, there's perhaps different match alternatives, but not the current ideal match of having the vendor pay the match.
But it does lower our overall need for state dollars to match, I guess it's.
Yeah, if we could use the funds for federal, if we could use the federal funds for the purpose, it would, but if we can't,
And
there's no savings.
I was kind of hoping for a silver lining there for a moment. Okay. Okay. I guess my only other thought, and perhaps you'll cover this more fully, but how this will affect us being able to meet our Global Warming Solutions Act requirements.
Well, I think this, in addition to many other programmatic areas that are currently under evaluation, could have significant impacts on meeting the Global Warming Solutions Act framework. So, you know, I think having the charging stations, having the federal tax credit for electric vehicles, having the state incentive programs, there's sort of a host of things that, and Clean Cars too, all these things come together and work as an interconnected web of decision points that become easier for consumers to interact with in terms of being more economical. And so the choices folks will make or be able to make may be reduced. I'm happy to come back another time to talk about the rest of my budget that's in the slides. I am going to submit an updated presentation just to correct the status of those funds and the date on the slide deck.
So I would like you to come back and give us on the last slide.
Yeah.
A better,
Federal picture, yeah.
we can spend, we're gonna move into the miscellaneous DMV bill. You got everybody here.
Mhm.
We could spend, how much longer will it take you to run through this?
Yeah, probably 10 minutes to run through the other.
And why don't we do that till quarter after, then we'll take 5 minutes off, and then we'll spend the rest of our time till noon going through the miscellaneous DMV bill.
Yeah.
So why don't you take
Yeah.
10 minutes to run through this, and then we'll schedule you to come
Yeah.
back and highlight that area so we better understand where all of that is.
Okay, will do.
Should I give a vacation? Sure.
Okay.
Real pictures there too.
Let's make sure. I just want to briefly touch on policy planning and research. This is an area that stays fairly stable year to year with really usually just a cost of living type increase. One area that has gone up significantly in this area is the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. They have a federal set aside that's a pass through our planning program funds from the federal government. And so they saw a $550,000 increase in their pass through allotment, and they match those the bulk of those funds internally on their own. And then we did have we had a reduction of one person in our public outreach program, and that program was evaluated when the vacancy became open, and we ended up reclassifying that position into the state policy director. Patrick Murphy now holds that position. So you'll see the general administration, that's not Patrick's salary, but that was one of the elements that increased our general admin cost, as well as operational costs within the division that are not covered by federal grants. Okay. Rail program. The rail program, I think, as you all know, is run on discretionary grants from the Federal Rail Administration. All of our discretionary grants from the federal government are currently on pause. And so while this is not impacting our construction season yet, it could, I think we'll be watching this closely to better understand if, the contracts we've already executed begin to move forward. When will those payments be needed, and how will we fulfill those obligations? So that's the biggest note there. A lot of our budget increase has to do with the flood recovery grants that we are working on, and then we have the big element of finishing the 29 bridges on the Rutland to Hoosick, New York project, which has been a number of years in coming. We're also, the state will benefit from a tri-state rail grant of continuously welded rail replacement along the Amtrak Vermonter, for which New England Central Railroad is paying a $5 million match, and the federal government is paying $5 million. So we have rail safety upgrades there. In terms of the potential JTOP cut risk list, it's laid out here. I think you've gotten a memo from Jana on this as well. So $3 million would be selected from our rail program, including delays in our next stage of our Amtrak to Montreal program. And then basically through our prioritization system of moving rail projects, the sort of next tier of crossing and bridge projects would not continue to advance. And on the aviation program side,
But that's if we don't accept the JTOC transfer,
Yeah.
that's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a little, I don't love the framing of this because I think it kind of sets us up to make poor decisions. Because it's saying, oh, if you don't do the JTOC transfer, here's the things that we're gonna cut. Which I don't necessarily think is an accurate reflection of the decision-making matrix that we have available to us. I respect that you've also put like specific projects that affect my district very directly. I'm sure that's not intentional, but I don't think that this is the only option for us. It's not just do the JTOC transfer, get this, or don't do the JTOC transfer, don't get this.
Mhm.
Is that a fair?
I would say that the decision-making and the choices that are available to the legislature are different than the considerations of the administration. And so when we were asked to identify $20.25 million in cuts to the programs across the agency, we looked everywhere we could and with choice of not wanting to identify any personnel cuts. And then we looked at, what are the things that have to be done because they may have a safety criteria attached to them. And what are the things that could probably wait another year? And that's where we come up with our cut list.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm surprised that the roof repairs and weight weren't considered a safety risk.
So,
I would just say that as we talk to our colleagues within the legislature, that without new revenue or without revenue, we're at risk. In I think whichever way you look at this, I personally would much rather what we were talking about is the purchase and use tax coming back from the ed fund that grows over time. But I think we're in a position where at some level, we have to talk to our colleagues and explain to them why, what the consequences of not moving revenues back into doing transportation projects, whether it's JTOC, whether it's new revenue, or whether it is purchase and use tax coming without some influx of more revenue for transportation. What are the kinds of things that are at risk? And the choices in the administration are different than the legislature might make. But I think it's quite clear that without revenue someplace, we can't help towns. We can't help if revenue is an issue on our table.
on the aviation,
And I totally appreciate your question in this, but
No, you're correct.
on the aviation program side, you'll see that we are also grant driven here. The FAA grants that we are receiving at 26 are anticipated to be significantly less by about $10 million than they were last year. You'll also see we had a bump up, not all of which is attributed to this, but we have, as you know, segregated the administration of the rail and aviation programs. And so we now have a aviation program director. And the other thing that's happening on the admin line is we have project managers positions, that limited service positions that we've had a very hard time filling. And typically we have a more difficult time filling also aviation maintenance worker positions. And we find ourselves now at just about 100% staffed. And so we're seeing a bit of an increase on the admin line. And then once
Might get a lot of FAA folks.
yeah, you never know. And so here's the cut list for the aviation side in terms of the delay of various projects and reduction in activities that would occur. So that's my last slide.
you just about quarter after. I would,
That's a cool question on the
Sure.
Montreal project.
Yes.
You mentioned it, the other on your slide. So is that in FY 26, that money for the design? Or that's
Yeah,
for
that-
future?
That's in 26 that we would be expected to come up with that money for the design, the
And how
next
much
phase.
was it?
Oh, geez.
Is it the $100,000 that's on the cut list, or is there more?
No, it's the 100,000 that's on the cut list. Yeah, that was the entirety of what our responsibility is between York, Montreal, and Trappers. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and
We will want you back to.
Yeah.
Clearer, you know, it's a lot clearer this morning about what's at risk with, I don't like it.
it's clearer
but
yet than
it's better
yesterday.
than
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah,
You know, the
it's,
emotional roller coaster of all of this is like,
it's very difficult to follow. And, you know, even our division office here at HWA, I think, is often challenged with getting information that we may hear different things from a different source coming out of Washington than they do. And so there's a lot of churn at this point that is impacting programs.
What would you, can I ask?
go ahead.
What would you recommend to us for, as legislators? Because your exact point about the churn, I mean, I have constituents who are emailing me saying, this person got fired because I can't get them anymore, or this thing doesn't exist. And it's like, I don't know how to verify any of that information or where to send them or where to get information myself.
Yeah.
What would your recommendation be? And
Well, I think we find it also difficult to respond to inquiries from Vermonters, organizations that
yeah,
have contracted with us historically as to like, will there be money for our contract next year? And you know, the verifiable information is difficult to ascertain. You know, the implementation of executive orders and the duration of when that might occur varies. And so it's hard right now for us to discern like what is at risk. And, you know, I think at some point, the agency will probably need to sort of take all of its information that it's gathered and begin to work with our attorneys to better understand where the risk lies. And I think, you know, Secretary Clark talked to this issue the other day, and I think it's not just the Agency of Transportation, it's across state government. So I think we are looking to take our lead from the Agency of Administration as well.
and the governor has a task force, but also the treasurer has a task force, or
That is something I haven't heard of yet, but that probably is true.
Oh,
Yes. So, all right.
Thank you,
Same.
and we will be back in touch. We're gonna take 5 minutes and, so